Tonight on the line, diligently debunking deities with Dillahunty, with your host, Jimmy Snow, and featured guest, Matt Dillahunty. This is The Line. The good news is, David, who's producing and listening, nobody saw that. I have confirmed that David hit stream but was still on the screen, and y'all almost found out what his pajamas look like.
Oh,
it's too bad. Matt, before we get started today, I actually wanted to tell you about a dream I had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a horse. And anybody who watched the Atheist Experience earlier today already gets the joke, so we can just move on from it already.
Fuck you and the horse you rode in on.
And then, how was talking to God?
Actually annoying, and I expected that was going to be the case, but because I was going to see if I could make something fun of it, like maybe I'll prove to God that God doesn't exist or whatever, but then he said that he was trans-rational.
Right.
And what he meant was he had gone beyond the bounds of ordinary mortals' reasoning.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in special pleading, and God should have fucking known that.
But that's what did he say? That's a false assertion of omniscience.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
And that's when I asked him what his characteristics were, because he's going to say, oh, I'm God, but I'm not omniscient. Oh, cool. My bad. I just assumed we were talking about the God of classical theism. Is your God more like when I say this Coke Zero is my God? Because, if that's the case, I'm unimpressed.
Yeah, hey, let's just make words mean whatever we need in that moment, and then all words become meaningless. It's the best.
Why not? If people like that.
We do have a pretty exciting announcement, and because my suggestion was shot down, we'll also have an opportunity for people to jump in and add comments on what they're thinking would be a good title. But starting September 10th, which is a Thursday, and every Thursday on this channel on The Line, our very own Matt Dillahunty will be hosting a singular call-in show, though obviously you might have guest hosts, but I don't even know what to, basically, we're going to be
We haven't entirely decided.
There's still a lot up in the air, but a Matt Dillahunty call-in show on The Line every Thursday. I wanted to call the show Dillahunty Raw and Uncut. Apparently Matt doesn't love that name, so we're going to be open to suggestions. Do know whenever I say open to suggestions, that may mean that we choose none of the suggestions, but we're open to them. So leave a comment on what you think.
Yeah, it's not like if you put like a $50 super chat in right now, you get to name it Dildo Hunty.
That can be tonight's show for sure. And then also we still have lines open, but we have some waiting on the lines, but we have lines open. So if you are a theist and you would like to call in and tell us why we should be compelled to believe in your God or some version of theism, or you would like to talk through some sort of maybe incredulous situation you have where you're like, I just can't get past this. This is compelling me to believe in God. We'd love to have that conversation as well. I'm just so surprised Otangelo hasn't tried to call in yet. I would have put money down and lost it. But other than that, Matt, you ready to jump into calls here?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. We're going to start off in Michigan with Jill. Jill, how are you today? Jill, can you hear me? Oh, sorry. I think we had our line out to Jill muted. Jill, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Hi.
Sorry for the confusion there. How are you today?
Having just a mild panic attack.
Oh.
Breathe.
Okay.
Why? Can we help?
Check your five senses. That's an exercise I do that helps.
Yeah, just take a breath.
We're good. We're good.
Cool. Welcome.
What did you want to talk
Hi.
about today, Jill?
Okay. So I guess so I've watched a lot of Mr. Atheist over the years, and I was raised super hardcore atheist. Like, as much as you were raised Mormon, I was raised atheist. So
I'm skeptical, but go on.
Oh,
yeah.
Like the same amount of indoctrination, like the same level of manipulation was put into my upbringing as almost what you described. I also grew up in a pretty abusive family, but
which I'm not trying to deny that experience at all, but I guess the question I have for clarification there is with Mormonism has a set of doctrines and tenets that's the thing they're enforcing on you and that they're forcing you to believe, and you can source it all back to their prophets, their doctrines, and the like. Whereas as far as atheism goes, there's only an extent to which you can.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess, Jill.
My mother was God.
Yeah, I'm going to guess, Jill, because I've dealt with this before. There are plenty of asshole atheists out there whose view is religion is bullshit, and I'm going to teach my kids that religion is manipulative bullshit. It's the opiate of the masses, and blah, 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 blah. Instead of, they're not teaching skepticism. They're not teaching critical thinking as much as hate religion. And they're still atheists. It's just not representative of me.
I definitely don't disagree with that, but that's more of like an anti-theism philosophy, but that's also just, like you were saying, non-skeptical and stuff.
Yeah. So what was yours like, Jill?
You're right. To that extent, it wasn't the same like level of. Well, I guess to me it was. There were levels of like, oh Lord, there were teachings that we had, sayings that we had to talk about when we were asked what our religion was. Like, I can't even remember it anymore, but religion is the fist that humanity is taught to beat. I don't remember, but anyway. But let
me say this. I just want to say that is not who I am or anybody that I would endorse, and so we're glad you called. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I've come to see that. Yeah, I've come to see that, and Jimmy, watching your show has really helped me not just open my eyes to kind of the flaws in religion, but also kind of the good parts and the bad parts of teaching reality to my own children, like teaching openness and honesty, and like teaching. I'm too nervous to think of words.
It's all
my
good.
God.
It's all good.
I'm not word braining properly.
Yeah.
But I did want to say that I did have some questions about if someone feels that the religion that again, my religion is certainly not anything close to normal, like Christianity or normal Judaism. It's just kind of like everything cobbled together in something that makes me whole and makes me feel happy. And I wanted to know if that's something that someone feels, would you consider that the same as say traditional Mormonism or traditional Judaism? Would that be considered on the same level? Would you consider that something different?
In my own having these discussions and talking to people about their belief system, the way I've put it is that there are people of a certain type of religion and a certain way of believing that I consider a much higher priority than other people. There are people whose minds that I actually would love to believe that I'm capable of changing, and then there are those people whose minds that I'm less concerned about. So I have polytheistic friends, for example, that I don't go after with the same veracity as I'm going to with a person who's like a traditional Christian and trying to impose those kinds of views. That said, so like the way the question was put in the notes here too that I kind of want to address was that if religion is valid, if someone feels it enhances their life. And my main concern there is that a person is incapable of making that assessment if they have certain sets of beliefs and if their religious beliefs have changed what they believe when something is good. So for example, Mormons all the time say the phrase, even if I found out the church wasn't true, I'd still live it because I'd still be a good person. But that's by the standards within the church, because you actually aren't a good person if it's not true, because you are promoting certain types of discrimination and bigotry in other people. So I'd be very worried about that. But then also, when it comes to religion in general and talking about whether or not religion causes harm, all religion or none, I do think that anything that is faith-based causes at least a small amount of harm, because it perpetuates, even for other people, that faith is a reasonable method of starting, and that you should take things on the basis of faith, meaning religious faith, not just like the colloquial confidence use. And so even to the people that I don't see a high priority, and I'm not trying to get in arguments with, I still think the perpetuation of the ideal that faith is a reasonable method to get to truth, or a reasonable starting point, I think that is actually harmful. And so while I will say there are religious people that I'm glad they are nice people and they are good people, and that their humanism comes first and they figure out a way to let their religion justify their humanism, I don't think most religion, and potentially any religion, isn't without at least that foundational harm of faith perpetuation. Matt, to you.
Okay.
Well, I'm just curious, Joe, because I don't know the specifics of what type of religion you've created. And for me, it doesn't gel with my brain, because I only care about whether or not it's true. And so when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I have this particular religious belief, or the collection of beliefs that I've kind of put together and cobbled together from, what my experience was, or what somebody told me, it doesn't matter where it came from. And I want to know, like, it seems like kind of you're asking, hey, if this enhances my life and makes me feel better, is that okay? We had this exact same question in some form today on Atheist Experience. And what I asked the caller, well, normally I would just ask, do you care about whether or not your beliefs are true? But in this case, it was like, what if if somebody thought they had a lucky rabbit's foot, is that going to be a problem? Well, what if they're getting ready to cross a busy street with their eyes closed and they're trusting that the lucky rabbit's foot's going to guide them? Those are two fundamentally different things. And
no, don't do that.
Yeah, well, what are you getting out of your religion?
Like, jumping across rivers, but
well, there are people. I'm wondering what you get out of your religion.
So for me, I had a daughter die of prematurity, and I've also, I'm recently remembering being groomed and molested pretty much from birth. As well as, I've been sex trafficked when I was a teenager. So for me, a belief in God is more like just in those moments where I literally had no one, thinking that there's someone that actually cared, and giving me someone to just kind of hold on to remind me to just keep fighting, to just keep holding on, that there is going to be a tomorrow where I can be happy and I can be whole. And especially now having that future where I've got my son and I've got, I just got engaged and things are, I'm finally, starting to be the way I dreamed of when I was, in those really rough situations. It kind of gives me that sense of like, I had something to hold on to when I felt like I had nothing. And even if it was just myself and my own head, those moments were enough. And I'm okay if there's really nothing. Like, I guess for me, I'm okay with that. And I guess, again, watching Mr. Atheist just kind of made me confront that more, that what am I going to do if there's nothing? Well, I guess that's okay, because I survived these moments, and that's the most important thing. And, as long as I'm, again, teaching my son to question things and to think intelligently and to make smart choices, I guess that's the most important thing, right? And for me too, as long as I'm being intelligent and, making smart choices, I guess, and again, being a good human, being a good mom, being a good person, those are what matter. And
yeah, all that is great. And all of that is great. And all of that is stuff that you should be teaching your son. I'd say that the drawback here is that, granted, I don't want to be the asshole who's like, oh, where was God when all this bad stuff was happening? But it doesn't matter, because if what you decided, you needed a MacGuffin, you needed something that could give you the hope that you didn't think that you could give yourself. However, if there isn't actually a God, then you did give yourself that hope, and you should take credit for that. And what you should be teaching your son is that you don't have to reach for something fanciful beyond yourself. You just have to recognize that with the right actions and with the right mindset, you increase your chance of persevering through adversity. There's no guarantee bad things are going to happen to everybody, but not giving up and doing everything in your power to make sure that you are more likely to come out the other side better is about the best thing you could do. Even if there was a God, that would be true.
Yeah, I think when I listen to your story, one of the big things that contrasts between ours, though there are certain things that are definitely absent. I wasn't sex trafficked, but did have to deal with sexual situations as a child that I shouldn't have had to go through, where the thing that you're describing as the thing that brought you comfort and relief from your adversity was the source of my adversity in the case of mine. And so it's kind of like when you're looking at things and you can have, so for example, talking about faith, two conclusions that are totally the opposite and in fact contradictory to each other on the same basis. The most important thing I think you can do is determine whether or not it's true. So you even said, maybe it was just in my head, maybe it was just me. I suspect it was. And that to me makes you a badass. I wouldn't call that a negative thing, like, oh no, there's no God. I would say that's like, yeah, you did do it. And so for me, and I think it's true of Matt, in fact, I know it is because he says it all the time, my priority is, even if something is an uncomfortable truth, I want to know it's true or not. And so I think for you, when you go, maybe it was all in my head, I want to encourage you to actually then go, I should really think about that, figure out if that is the case, because if at the end of the day I determine it was in my head, now I know a truth that I didn't know before. And
you know, working through with my therapist, I think we've kind of determined that it probably was just me needing that kind of, like you were saying, that MacGuffin to kind of, you know, but again, what I've determined, I think, is that as long as I had something to kind of get me through, I don't know,
I agree with the need for something to get you through, but to give an example without going into too much detail, because it's something I still don't love talking about publicly much, but with my own medical history, I have twice in my life now had to go through long-term medical procedures, essentially medical routines, that essentially kill you.
Me
but
too.
Right
Those
before you die, they stop it and they hope that it killed your problem first. I'm sure people can figure out what I'm talking about. It's not exactly subtle this time, but that's a horrible situation. And the first time I went through the specific version of the treatment, I was basically allergic to, and I kept having these pain reactions where I would feel like my bones inside my body were splintering and stabbing into my muscles. It was horrible.
Jesus.
I went through that as an atheist, and my hope wasn't for a God who has, I feel great because there's this loving being, even though I'm aware of all of the things that he's completely ignored about other people's suffering. My hope was for, I'm going to right now go through this medical procedure because by doing it, later I'm going to get to live life again, either closer to what my old quality of life used to be, or at least in a better quality of life, and I'd get to extend out my life. And that, when you don't have God, it doesn't mean you don't have things you can draw on for hope. So I went from being a person who with God was frankly suicidal for most of my teenage years to a person who as an adult without a God was putting effort into living longer, which would have been absurd to the teenage version of me. And so it's, again, I think it just comes down to, am I mad at you, or am I going to try and tell you you're evil or you're wrong for taking comfort in your God, or if that's what got you through it? No, but I do still think between the two of us having a conversation, whether it's true or not is important. And I think it's good for you to find out if it is true, especially if you're influencing other people.
It was interesting for me to hear Jill talk about this because, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, I promise, but I don't know any other way to say it. It reminds me of someone, a young child with an imaginary friend that helps them get through something difficult. I'm all in favor of whatever helps you get through the difficulty, provided it doesn't stay as a mechanism that you're going to use forever. It's like when you realize, oh, that was me all along, that gives you the freedom to let go of that. Now, if it turns out that there is some God and this God was actually helping you, it would be really nice if that God would make that clear so that you weren't sitting around confused about whether or not there was a God helping you or whether or not you helped yourself. As far as I can tell, we all help ourselves. But we also help each other.
This is why I called in. I love these conversations. They're fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I love these kind of, I don't know, it really makes me think. And that's kind of why I feel like as soon as we stop thinking, as soon as we stop learning, we die, you know? So this is fascinating. And
well, I'm pretty convinced that once I'm dead, I will in fact stop learning. But I can't rule out the possibility that I might stop learning a little bit before I'm dead.
That's also, yeah, very valid. Anything else you wanted to chat about before we let you go here, Jill?
I guess I think also because I've had the medical issues, like I've had some pretty severe medical issues too. And, especially because a lot of the hospital staff was also very religious. It kind of, I think, fed into that when I was going through some of especially the really painful medical procedures, or when you have those really long hospital stays. When you are religious, those staff that are religious really do feed into that kind of religious mentality of like, God will heal you. And I think in almost a psychosomatic way, it does help in some ways, but I think, like you were saying, you know, it is kind of a crutch. And I wouldn't really say I'm a badass. I think I just survived, but
with my own medical experience, I've definitely noticed something similar with the religious staff and stuff like that. But I also noticed that as an atheist, when instead of expressing my gratitude to God's healing me, I started expressing my gratitude to the people actively healing me, that even the religious people clearly very much appreciated the sentiment. In fact, it's almost sad the level to which, if you go into something that is such a service to people, that you are going to have to probably sacrifice 80% of the gratitude that perhaps should be directed to you to be given to God instead. It's in North Korea, they do it with the supreme leader instead of God. There's actually a documentary, I don't remember the name of it, but it's this doctor who goes over to North Korea and over the course of like a week cures something like 5,000 people's cataracts, and you see them get their bandages off and they get up and instead of thanking the doctor, they go thank a picture of the supreme leader and make promises of what they're going to do now with their eyes. And you're just sitting there going like, maybe the doctor should get a thank you. Maybe at least a like, wow, I really appreciate this thing you did for me. And so in that way, if we're talking about the problems or the harm that even things that seem nice can do, the misdirection of gratitude or even just attribution and credit, I think certainly is it certainly is there.
Yeah. And I've also noticed because I'm originally from Southern California. I moved to Oregon when I was 18, and now I'm living in Northern Michigan. So just noticing the change in the amount and ferocity of religious people up here really made me question how much religion I want in my life and in my kids' life, especially just with some of my in-laws.
I think if you can teach your kids to be dependent...
And I've started to really see the damage that it can do, and I don't want that for my family.
I think if you can teach your kids to be independent and not have to rely on a God, even if there is a God that is real, their life is going to be better off. Regardless, if you can teach them to do it without the God, they're going to be better off either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was easier. I know exactly how much religion I want in my life, and that is I want exactly as much religion in my life as has been proven to be true.
Yeah. Unless talking to Otangelo is having religion in my life, in which case I want less than that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't necessarily have religion in my life to be able to discuss it with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, a religion is a functional part of my life. But,
I get it, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that little dig because I'm a dick.
Jill, I think...
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to be too presumptive or anything else, Jill, but I think listening to you are clearly thoughtful and self-reflective, and you're working your way through stuff. Just getting back to the actual question that you submitted at the beginning, which, in the call screen thing, is religion valid if someone feels it enhances their life? No, because that's not what valid means, but I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. I'm pretty convinced you're going to be fine and you're going to get to where you're comfortable with your beliefs no matter what they are.
Oh.
Oops.
Did we lose? There we go.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess that. I just need to stop worrying. Oh my God.
Yeah. and when you say that, don't do the let go and let God. Just let go and focus on life.
Yeah. There is plenty to worry about, but stop worrying about this. The world's on fire. Right now, if you look behind me, it's actually literally true. Because we are covered in a giant cloud of smoke at the moment. So go worry about those things that warrant the worry.
Did you know there's a COVID crisis line you can call?
Good. I'm relieved to hear that.
Like if you're stressed out.
I wish I'd have known that months ago.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I just found that because there's there's COVID parties that people take their kids to. So I had to call that yesterday and just rant for an hour on the phone with this wonderful woman. Oh my God. So yeah, that's a thing. It's on the CDC
Are these COVID parties the same as
Are
these COVID parties the same as the chickenpox parties and stuff that the anti-vaxxers would do?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Oh my God, fuck those people.
Yeah. It's
woman took her kids to one and was posting about how awesome a mom she was. I can't even. I had a full meltdown about it. I can't.
Yeah, we got to find a way. We got to find a way to change education so we can help those people. So that instead of saying "fuck those people," I can say, "Hey, hang on, you're killing your kids. You're killing each other."
No,
I'm split between we have to save the world.
And
I was gonna say I'm split between we have to save the world and the whole maybe it's time for humans to leave this world behind because it can be tough. My misanthropy. Is that the way you pronounce it in that form? Can become immense. Jill, we want to give you a chance here to just give a final thought or something, but we do want to jump to some more callers here.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I just want to say thank you for Jimmy for your show, and you do incredible work. I love your 2 camera angles. Thanks. Really snazzy, super incredible. Your film production is just fabulous.
I appreciate that. No, there's only one camera angle on this show, but I do appreciate that too. I enjoyed the sarcasm of that camera. I have the second.
I was like, is there a second camera that I'm missing that's underneath the table or something, and you've been flipping me off this whole time and I just didn't see it?
So you don't see in my regular show, I will often undercut a punchline by turning and delivering to a camera that I have over here. And I also like it too. But then a bunch of people, I think the reason she's bringing it up was because I mentioned in an episode that after adding it, I'm fine with people giving criticism, but some people were just being assholes
they were jerks.
About, I had changed their world
actual jerks.
By adding the second camera. And if your world can be changed that much by me, you need to reassess your whole life.
If I had added a second camera and people started, what's that?
I was just saying, do they not notice the world on fire?
Yeah. But if I'd added a second camera and people talk shit about it or gave me anything, I'd have sunglasses, and every time I thought of a dad joke line, it'd be look at the camera, and then you'd have the Who kick off.
In the recent episode, I told people to click if they'd like me to add 7 more, though that's not something I can actually afford to do. But
yeah, if they want 7 more, they're going to have to do more than click like. They're going to have to donate and subscribe. And
we're going to need the money. I also have a third camera angle for when I'm doing like unboxing on my Twitch channel and stuff, but that's up here. But so I'd have to kind of like crane to. Anyway, Jill, it was lovely talking to you. We're going to jump into some of these other calls here. We hope you have a good
Jill.
day. Good luck in Michigan, and hopefully we'll hear from you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm. Bye, Jill. All right. Let's talk to Milo, who is on the East Coast. Very vague, very ambiguous location, which is okay. Milo, how are you doing? Milo, can you hear me? I think I'm going to send...
Yes, can hear you.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Milo.
Yeah, sorry. My speaker was not working.
No worries. What did you want to chat about today?
Dealing with the guilt and fear left behind while leaving religion.
Oh, if you left it behind, then you don't have to deal with it anymore, right?
Well, in the process, still being surrounded by people who constantly guilt and shaming.
And that was the point, is that in some cases, the indoctrination and the entire process where guilt and shame and other things are tools used to manipulate and control and keep you in line, it can take the rest of your life to scrub that out to where it's not like a nagging whisper in the back of your head. Some people, everybody's story is going to be different, so it takes a different amount of time for different people. Some people never get past it. Some people get past it fairly quickly. So how can we help you figure out a way where you don't have to have that baggage hanging around?
I was really more wondering about the what if fears.
Yeah.
The what if it is real? What if I do? What are some of the things that y'all have maybe looked at that are like more solid proof? Because I can't really have access to that kind of stuff for the most part.
What do you do when you come across the what if it's true? What happens next in your head?
Oh God, what if I'm going to hell?
Which hell?
Christian hell. The one where you burn and are tortured for the rest of eternity.
What, do you spend any time at all worrying about anybody else's hell?
I mean, a couple other things that I've seen, it's been pretty sheltered. I don't know much about some of the other. That's the point.
That's the point, though. You're largely you're only afraid of the hell that you used to believe in, and you don't worry about the afterlife for other religions. And when you realize that, had you been born somewhere else or raised somewhere else, you would probably be fearful of some other, eschatology, some other afterlife, some other. Eschatology is not right. Soteriology. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You would have been afraid of something else that's slightly different. And for me, when I realized that I hadn't spent any time at all wondering what would happen, if Buddhism turns out to be right, or if Hinduism turns out to be right, or if Scientology turns out to be right, I was only worried about the one that I had been threatened with and brought up with. And that's a cool question, because if you don't know which religion is likely to be true, do you seek the one with the best heaven, or you try to avoid the one with the worst hell? And if you haven't examined and explored to figure out what hell options there are and what heaven options there are, how do you make a decision? And at the end of the day, if the God was real behind any of these, why would this be a question? It seems to me that if what's keeping people in line is fear, that speaks volumes about potentially what kind of truth might be behind it. Because if in fact there's a God who loves, why is fear the tool that is nagging at you? I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer. I wasn't putting it up there. This is just kind of food for thought, because I think if you sit down and say, I'm so worried about this one hell, I'm so worried about this one afterlife. I'm worried. Essentially, you are worried about exactly one religion and what happens if it turns out to be true. And the problem is that you can't even identify, like within Christianity, there's well over 1,000 different denominations that all have different criteria. Well, they don't all have different criteria. There are many different answers to what must one do to be saved, or what's the afterlife like. And so you look at people like, why am I blanking on Billy Graham, who went to seminary with Fred Phelps. And my understanding is that, they went seminary together and they knew each other early on. Fred Phelps believed in a literal hell, and Billy Graham believed in annihilation, is my understanding. That's what I've been told. But in any case, you can pick two pastors that disagree on what happens after you die. If they can't sort it out, and God isn't nice enough or caring enough to help them figure out what the right answer is, what hope do you and I have? And if God loves us all equally, why hasn't God cleared this up? Why is God so amazingly absent? Why is it that miracles decline as our ability to investigate them increases? I think the thing that you're dealing with here is a lack of certainty. And the baggage that comes along with it, like you can't be sure that you're right in your disbelief. Have you done your due diligence? Have you thought about this? Did you sincerely try to find the answer?
Yeah, I think I did. I used the resources that I had. It's more like a high adrenaline type, like the thought that comes in when it's like, oh no, last chance, kind of very urgent thought. But sorry,
but if you've done everything you can.
Other part of the
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the other part of this was how do you help younger siblings out of this when you're still dealing with your own fear?
So, have you ever been on an airplane?
Nope.
Oh. Well, if you ever do get on an airplane, the flight attendants will go through all the safety options. And the first thing that they'll tell you when the oxygen mask drops is to secure your own oxygen mask first and then help others. You may not be able to help younger siblings until you've got a grip on this, but you may be able to help them in the sense of sharing who you are and what you think with them, and allowing each of you to be supportive of each other. But if you've done your due diligence and there's some God out there that still wants to send you to hell, my view is that God, I can't stop him from sending me to hell, but it doesn't mean he's moral or good, and therefore he's not the God I believed in when I was a believer anyway.
It sounded like
I can't stop some thug from beating me up.
Thug's gonna thug. It sounds like, too, from early in the call, it sounds like you also have very limited access to exterior resources, and I would definitely recommend you start working on that, whether it's on the internet where you can now get every book ever, but start finding more information. Also, you had mentioned early on that it sounded like you were asking for almost like a top 10 list of reasons why I'm just sure Christianity isn't true, or just those things that you can go to.
No, just
yeah.
I don't want to correct harshly, but I just meant because you have spoken about coming out of Mormonism yourself.
Yeah.
And obviously that had to have something must have spurred that along, or just some of the thought processes or specific resources, because a broad look I can't really come across. But top 10 reasons why it's false wasn't exactly what I was looking at.
Are you coming from Mormonism specifically, or something else?
Very, very conservative father.
Okay, but you're not a Mormon?
No, not specifically.
Okay. So basically the point I was going to make is that those things do exist. So like with Mormonism, for example, the list of things that are reasons why Mormonism isn't true, this awesome guy named Jeremy Runnels basically put them into a book, and it's just like a compartmentalized list of this. It's scientific facts, historical facts, all kinds of things in a row. And that thing was called the CES Letter, which it's an amazing thing. But had I read it while I was a believer, it wouldn't have shaken my faith, at least not right off the bat, because much more so than the resources you need to know why something is untrue is you need a good reason to know why something is true. So my deconversion from Mormonism didn't come from, oh my God, look at the list of reasons Mormonism isn't true. It came when I finally gave myself permission to consider that Mormonism isn't true and to now look for good, definitive reasons why it is. Basically, it's the opposite. I realized Mormonism wasn't true when I tried to prove it was true in an actual, honest way, like Matt was talking about, doing actual due diligence. It didn't come because people were telling me all the time. I started hearing about how DNA proves the Book of Mormon isn't true when I was 9. It didn't bother me until I was almost 20. And I didn't start, that wasn't a fact that I had ready to go to spout at somebody until later in life and only in the appropriate setting. So basically, rather than looking for those things of why those religions aren't true or whatever religion you've been exposed to isn't true, having the honest discussion with yourself, employing actual skepticism, doing actual due diligence to come up with a good reason to believe it is true. Not just that it makes you feel good, but actually that you can demonstrate some truth there. That is a far more effective way, and it's also going to be a more effective way of getting truth, but it's also going to help you get over those things you're talking about.
You have to do it. You have to do it. No, you can dogpile evidence against a proposition all day long, and it will not prove that the proposition is false. However, the time to believe something is once it's been demonstrated to be true. And what Jimmy's talking about is the same thing that I did, as a Southern Baptist, which is what are the evidence and arguments that what I believe is actually true. And I couldn't find anything that wasn't fallacious, demonstrably false, or insufficient to the task.
Yeah. Is there some good information there for you to consider, Mila?
Yes.
Good deal. Because we definitely gave you a lot too, and I always recommend to people who call in, go back and watch the call again. Maybe have a notepad or something, process everything a second time. And I do wish you the best, and I hope it goes well with your siblings. One thing I will tell you about siblings now, I can only speak to the dynamic we had as adults. It sounds like your siblings and yourself might be a little bit younger. I was openly out, and I was the first member of my family out of Mormonism. And then followed the brother who's producing the show and also edits my regular show, and then another brother who lives here in Denver, who I built a good relationship with. And while I had discussions with them, while I had arguments with them, and while I had debates with them, I am not who changed any of their minds. And in fact, I wouldn't say I don't think I slowed their progress out of the religion, and I definitely think that there is a comfort in when you're not the first one out, where you can go like, oh, well, if I do consider this and I leave, at least I'm not the first one to go. I think that probably exists, but it definitely wasn't me who changed their mind. So do your best to learn as many facts as you can, learn how to ask good questions, and make people think, because that's going to be, if you go away from a conversation with somebody, even one that becomes confrontational, you've won if they're thinking about the questions in an honest way that you've put in their mind.
You also make sure you understand the burden of proof. Anytime somebody's making any claim, you can throw yourself in a courtroom and ask, did they meet their burden of proof? Because if what you're going to do is try to find ways to disprove something, you're essentially asking a defendant to come in and prove that they're innocent. And we don't do that because that may be impossible. So if people are saying God is guilty of existing, they need to provide the evidence that God is actually guilty of existing. Until they do, the default position is to presume that God doesn't exist. And we have to have that default, because if we're being intellectually honest, which is why I asked about what other hells you had considered, we would have to say every God exists until we disprove them. Right. And that's an untenable situation. So instead, we can say no gods exist until they are proven to exist. And if we turn out to be wrong, how can that possibly be our fault if there's a God that could have demonstrated it existed and didn't?
Especially when so many options were presented. I think I understand where you're coming from here.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome, Milo. I think you're going to be fine, even if there's going to be a lot of struggling and pain in the meantime. And I want to just say now, I'm very sorry about how insufferable your father's about to become over the course of this election cycle that's really just ramping up. It's probably going to be the worst, but I do wish the best of luck to you.
Yeah, my whole
thanks,
family
Milo.
has MAGA hats. That's just a great thing.
Oh, wait, I'm on a show where I can say
talking
fuck
with me.
Trump.
Yeah, yes, you are. Yeah.
Thanks, Milo. We appreciate it.
We'll see you, Milo.
Thank you.
Wow. Round of applause. Call us back. Let us know how things are going.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I just want to mention, like, when we're talking about this Thursday show that Matt's going to be doing starting September 10th, that's one of the one of the bonuses is he's going to be allowed to say things like fuck Trump. Almost that could have just been an advertisement for the show. We can call the show fuck Trump. I'm fine with that.
I think I'd like to make it a little more broad than that, and maybe I'd like it to last beyond January.
I think I want that for my life, but I'm okay if my tombstone says fuck Trump. If the only contribution I have after my death is people seeing that tombstone, that's fine by me. All right, we head to Clearwater, swing state, swing area, and we're going to talk to David. David, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Happy to have you. What did you want to chat about?
Can you fit this into your topic of are you debunking all religion? Could you see where religion could be anything? What should religion look like if we're atheistic? What should our culture, society, and fellowship be for weddings and funerals and community?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure we need to have
We're all
weddings
atheists.
at all. Or marriages, at least some sort of ceremony celebrating two people deciding they're going to live together and whatever. I mean, whatever it means to people. I don't think it's something that's required by society, but I acknowledge that people like doing it and that they enjoy doing it. As far as what religion would look like in an ideal, like secular or atheist society, I think it would be non-existent, because the core to religion is this collective worship of somebody. You could potentially say worship of something, but I don't buy that we need worship at all. Now, people mistake the kind of thing you're talking about for some sort of community that's around a common set of values and a common set of causes. I'm all for having those communities. Communities all day long, but the moment you start talking about worship, you've lost me.
Religions don't have the market cornered on community, and it shouldn't. The Supreme Court, in one of the decisions, essentially defined religion as that which has or perspectives on matters of ultimate concern. And so, but I think they're underselling religion, because I can have no religion and still have views on matters of ultimate concern, like what happens after you die. As far as I know, death is the end. Until that changes, until there's evidence for it, I can't believe otherwise. So for me, as a secular humanist, I'm not opposed to community. I love community. I'm the president of the atheist community of Austin. I'm not even opposed to ritual, even though I don't personally find a whole lot of ritual stuff that I enjoy in a broad sense. But I got my own little rituals. I mean, I do this show on Sundays when I'm free. I'm going to be doing a show on Thursday nights. You could call that a ritual. But the question that you told the screener, which I think is close to what you're getting to, when you say how much myth do we still need, is that the aspect of religion that you're saying needs to stick around?
Yeah, humans have always needed myth. When the first art carved by cavemen were probably religious symbols. The first writing was probably.
Are we sure about that?
Scripture, and if
isn't the first thing that they would do art about with their daily life the things they were hunting?
It could be. They were. Well, I was getting towards let deities go to the museum, and maybe religious texts shouldn't have been taken so literally, and they could be in the category of art and poetry and history if it's not taken literally.
David, you said, though, the phrase that we've always needed myth, which is something that I don't agree with. I acknowledge that we've kind of always had myth, or at least it seems that way. But I can't speak to societies I never observed or anybody ever observed or wrote about. I could even go so far as to say, if you want to speak about myth broadly, to be just these sort of exceptional stories supposedly from the power that seem grander than what reality we usually offer. You could say that people have wanted myth for most of human history, but I don't buy, and I've talked about this with Santa before, where I don't think a child's experience I guess if people, we're talking about Santa in reality here, so I'll give people a moment to cover their kids' ears if it's necessary, but I don't think the experience and the fun of Santa has to be taken away if you acknowledge that it is fiction. I think you can play a game called Santa and play a game called Christmas, and everybody be aware and be told from the onset that it is a fiction and it's still enjoyable. So as far as needing to internalize these myths and needing to internalize these things that we now know not to be true as though they are true, that I inherently disagree with. Continuing to enjoy the history of them, putting them in museums, understanding the context of how they influence history. Obviously, I don't want to get rid of that, because in a way you're describing getting rid of truth, and the whole point of the show so far has been, I want to know what's true. So while I don't believe the Bible is true, I want to know the way Bible influenced ancient civilizations and what happened there. But I don't actually buy that we need to hold on, that myth is something that's a need of humanities.
Well, I know we're just talking words here, but if, like, what happened before, we don't know what happened before the Big Bang, so that's in the area of myth, or
no, it's
not.
Just a
strange label there, I guess.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Just because we don't know something doesn't mean that it's myth. And it doesn't mean that creating a myth about what we don't currently know is a good idea. Because if you create a myth that makes you think you know the answer, then you stop looking for the answer. And when people, come at me with this thing of, oh, well, maybe if the Bible weren't taken so literally. Well, okay. Have you ever said that about Mein Kampf?
No.
Yeah, and I haven't either. And so in a book that advocates for slavery, that, yes, does it get some things right? You bet. Has it inspired some people to do good things? Yes, it has. But it is not essential, and we don't need to keep it in any way, shape, or form, because the good can be inspired and derived without ever appealing to that. And if we just keep the Bible around and go, oh, well, this is maybe someday there'll be a Marvel superhero movie that includes Jesus the way we have Thor now. But I kind of doubt it, and I don't need it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, guys. I just want to say I'm an atheist, and it gets a little lonely out here. We can't be like you guys with our platform. We have to kind of stay hidden. Our neighbors are believers, and they're not looking for an argument, so we just have to keep our mouths shut.
I don't think that's true in Clearwater, as I've actually been there. But your neighbors might be different.
Really?
So you do what you think's right for you.
Yeah. All right. All right. I really appreciate you.
I can definitely appreciate having a local neighborhood that's different than the Clearwater I've been to as well. I thought that
Scientologists.
I thought, yeah, but where I actually moved from recently was a part of Denver that was a mostly liberal part. However, I found out during election time that, like, I mean, we're talking 8 out of 10 houses had MAGA signs out there. So it definitely happens. Yeah, stranger things for sure. Thank you for calling, though, David.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, it was actually a very strange. I should have realized it, though, because everywhere else I had been in this section of Denver had diversity, and then we get to this neighborhood, and we moved in before we met any of the neighborhoods, but it was like, how come everybody's white here? And it was basically this little conservative pocket of self-filleting white people.
Yeah.
It's a good time. We're headed to Kansas to talk to Maddie. Maddie, how you doing?
Hi.
I'm very, very intrigued by the question that you've put on here, so I definitely want to jump into it quick. But let us know how you're doing, and then let's jump into the question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. My question was, I see science falling behind on civil rights issues compared to individuals who are listening to the people affected. Like
science has nothing to do with civil rights issues.
Well, a while ago there was a science that's now been debunked called Eugenics.
Yes,
and
but
it had some very strong things on civil rights issues, and
okay, go ahead. If your point, I'm going to interrupt, Maddie, because I'm going to try and save you from doing something terrible. If your point is that some people in the name of science advocated for things like eugenics that are atrocities, you're absolutely correct. And what demonstrated that wasn't science was more science. Meanwhile, religions have advocated for atrocities and they don't correct at all. But science is not a process for determining, science is not a process for determining civil rights.
Yeah, I actually remember the last time you called in, Maddie, and the mistake that it seemed like you had made last time was that you associated any ideology that tried to use science as a basis, as though that is the ideology of science. But science isn't an ideology. It's a process by which we hopefully are getting to truth, and we are discovering the mechanisms by which the universe works. I
would completely agree.
Cool.
How do we get there faster?
How do we get where faster if we don't know where we're going? This is a process of discovery where we're constantly learning. And the process is about getting better at getting better. Okay. How do we get there faster? I would argue that one of the best ways to get there faster is to convince the world that they don't have a good reason to believe whatever religious crap they believe. That's the start, because the roadblock to discovering the right answer is anyone who's convinced they already have it. And religions are convinced that they have the right answer about the origin of the universe, the nature of the universe, what people should or shouldn't do with each other and anything else. Until we get rid of those things, they're going to be roadblocks. And we've dealt with this already. We've already had issues in the modern scientific era of people not accepting what the findings of science because it conflicts with their religion, right down to flat earth stuff, let alone, women shouldn't be equal to men or whatever. So that's the biggest stumbling block we've got. And it's not just the religions specifically. It is the thought processes that convince people that these religions are right. If you reach a conclusion for bad reasoning, like you decide something and your reasoning is flawed, that doesn't live in a vacuum. That reasoning sits around in your head, and if you used it as a tool to reach one belief, you can use it as a tool to reach other beliefs. So if religions aren't true, whatever process in your head led you to believe that they were true is clearly flawed, and that process will lead you to other flawed conclusions as well. So teaching people critical thinking, skepticism, and lining up the burden of proof and demonstrating evidence, that is the process. It's what Jimmy and I are doing when we're not just arguing with people.
Teaching people actual science in the first place. Definitely agree with everything you were just saying with skepticism, critical thinking, and everything. But right now, we're living in an era where people like QAnon and these anti-COVID people line up all of these reasons that they're calling science, and then they have the audacity to say the phrase, do your own research, when they don't actually know what the phrase research means. Certainly not from a scientific perspective, because they believe watching a YouTube video or finding an article through Google that confirms the answer they were already looking for is the process of doing research. So if you want something that is hugely actionable, that's going to actually stop people from claiming science supports something that it doesn't, the best thing you can do is educate people on what science actually is and what the limitations on science is as well. Because if you're looking to science, you can use science to inform things like your morality, but it is not an ideology and it can't choose it for you.
Right.
I think it would also help to have more diverse scientists, to get more women into science, to get more queer people into science, to get more people of color into science, to get more neurodivergent people into science. What I'm saying, what I guess my question is when you're a part of certain groups and you feel like there's this barrier to even enter the science, and my questions about the world aren't even getting considered, how can I be heard? Because I don't want scientific studies that just say the same thing over and over again to be published, or for scientists to make mistakes, and sometimes they do.
I'm really, really, really confused.
Yeah, we went all over the place there.
So first of all, you were like, hey, we need more women and people of color and neurodivergent people in science. And on every one of those, I said, why? Not because I disagree with you, because I want as many people involved in the sciences as we can. But there's no freaking quotas with science. Science doesn't care.
They have different...
No. Science is supposed to be unbiased and impartial. The type of thing that you're advocating for, of let's get more of this type of person in science because their viewpoint isn't being represented, is antithetical to what science is. Science has no viewpoint. And if people are doing science with a viewpoint, that's when science goes wrong.
But you can't avoid having a viewpoint as a person.
Correct, which is why we have science, because the entire process is designed to remove as much bias as... Oh my God.
People.
Are you going to let me finish, or are you just going to preach at me about science? Because one of us actually understands this and the other one doesn't. So can I finish?
I apologize.
Thank you. The process of science, the whole point is to remove as much bias, much individual personal bias as possible. That's why we have peer review. Did you get the same results that I did? Have I made a mistake here? Science is cutthroat in the sense of, I just think I discovered something. Please rip it to shreds. Please show that I have not injected my own bias. It is not a process by which we want more individual perspectives injecting their bias potentially. I'm fine with more people doing science.
Yeah.
But to say, oh, we need these people in science because their viewpoints aren't being represented, that's correct. Their viewpoints aren't being represented because that's not what science is about. Science doesn't represent viewpoints. It is out to eliminate viewpoints to get as close to the truth as we can.
Right. The appeal of diversity in these fields isn't actually at the level of the science itself, because the science should... Good science happens the same way regardless of the diversity that's present, because there's the human element. And I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt that this is the argument you're trying to make, and trying to give you the version that I agree with, I suppose, is that because there is that human element, it seems that more diversity has a tendency to check other people's biases. So if you have just a room full of white people that are doing race-related studies, their biases and their ability to support each other's biases are likely to be present, and having more diversity puts a check on that, meaning that the science ends up being better. But the science itself should not be influenced by, it wouldn't be a good thing to say, from the perspective of a person from this group,
Yes, and
how would you interpret that through your worldview? Because through your worldview shouldn't matter at all.
Yes, and even if a room full of white people doesn't think they're doing anything race-related, if they're doing something with people, if a room full of white people create an IQ test based on what they learned as children, that's going to be different across cultures, and that bias isn't going to be checked until somebody who didn't have that experience comes into the room.
Right.
Not
So,
true.
And when we are studying
That's just
things
that's
like
just not
queer-
true. That is just not true.
Okay.
What you just said is that, first of all, you described a bunch of people making an IQ test based on what they learned. That's not how IQ tests come about. That's not how the field of intelligence comes about at all. But you also just asserted that if they've made some sort of biased, flawed thing, that this can only be corrected by somebody who's not white, and that's simply false.
You're right. It could be corrected by anybody who knew the biases.
Yeah,
and
I want diverse people
right.
involved in the sciences because people think differently, and somebody's going to come up with something that nobody else thought of, but not
more
necessarily because they're white or black or male or female or whatever else.
right. Wherever those biases have a tendency to show up, of course, I think and this isn't even my scientific mind, I suppose, at this point. This is my humanistic mind. I would want to see more diversity there because I think you're going to see better conversations happening. And certainly outside of the realm of science, you definitely want to see it in the way things that affect policy that affect people are. So, for example, I think it is obviously ridiculous that we have all of these coalitions on abortions that are groups of 98% men making these decisions for things that aren't going to affect them in the same way. And while they're not incapable of coming to the right conclusion simply for being men, I think you are setting yourself up better for success by having that diversity. That said, if we're talking about something that is, again, science, and we just go to the things where these biases don't come in at all. So, for example, I'm getting into saltwater fish reef tanks, and they're trying to figure out the best way to promote coral growth. I'm not much concerned about the diversity of the group there unless it is revealed to me that a diversity barrier is being put into place and they are purposefully preventing people from other groups from participating.
I should have clarified. I'm talking mostly about social sciences like psychology and sociology, where sometimes the group of people being studied is not included in the group of people designing the experiments. And you're right. It is still possible to have an unbiased experiment. To me, that seems a bit like setting up for failure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've also expressed that we think the diversity amongst competent scientists probably only improves things. I don't think we have a disagreement there, but there were some basics to this about whether or not something could be done correctly on the basis of it.
If a group of sociologists if a group of sociologists were studying cancer patients and their propensity for faith-based positions, is there something wrong with the study if there's not a cancer patient with a faith-based position as one of the scientists?
No,
I think we're all on the same page, Maddie. I honestly, I mean, there's some people in chat who think that I'm wrong too, but I think we would all want more people involved in science because not everybody thinks the same, and because the more people we have doing science, the closer we are going to be to accuracy and elimination of bias and everything else. You phrased something as if it was almost like a quota thing, or somebody can't do this unless they're represented, and that's just not the way science works. Science wants to be as computer-like as possible, but it wants to be more like the Leela chess AI, where it has these intuitive leaps that don't represent what a normal. I went off on a chess algorithm thing. I should probably not do that without more explanation, so I'll stop.
I think what maybe
It's
you're
okay.
calling in
I
about.
sort of followed you. Yeah.
It may be that what
There
you're
is
calling in about is something that Matt and I both recognize too, and that is that diversity barriers definitely do exist in these places, and that's a terrible thing. But I think the reasoning and the line of reasoning you had to both why they exist and what the effects are weren't necessarily. It's kind of like where you see a thing that did happen and now you're saying, therefore, this is a dedicated pattern. Every time I throw a Frisbee off my balcony, I'm going to cause a car crash, even though that probably only will happen whatever the rates of it actually happening are. I'll start throwing Frisbees off today and tell you what happens.
I'm wrong, and I'm too stuck up, but they only used one O. So there are people who are evidently not on my side here. They should call in and explain why I'm wrong. Maybe Thursday, September 10th, they can call in and teach me exactly why I'm wrong about this, because I'm fucking not.
Right. It's.
I do feel like there is some pattern. I do feel like the study of race got better when people, different races, were involved. I do feel like the study of gender got better when people of different genders were involved.
I think we both agree with you, but that's the human element.
Not necessarily a prerequisite. Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
I'm in complete agreement with you that those things improved. I'm not in agreement with that is a necessary component, or that it can't happen without it. Yeah.
Okay. I can see why you aren't.
I mean, just to put it simply, so going with the abortion example, presuming that the correct answer is pro-choice, whether you agree with that or not, 100 men in a room are capable of coming to the conclusion that pro-choice is the correct answer. Now,
not only that, but the only debate that I've done publicly on abortion was me favoring pro-choice against an atheist woman who was anti-choice.
Right. So you have this room of 100 men. They are capable of it. Now, if you tell me that we've had 1,000 of those 100 men conventions and they've almost every single time not come to the correct conclusion, and that as soon as they started making it, they started stocking it with more people with uteruses, the answer started to be correct, I would have no problem believing that. In fact, I'd even say that almost sounds completely likely. What we're saying is, yes, it does happen. Diversity barriers exist. Yes, mistakes happen because of people's biases. It is not an existential fact of the universe that if 100 men get together and are discussing abortion, they are going to get the answer wrong. However, if you gave the question to me and you said, you go form the coalition, there's probably going to be very few men in the coalition I would form. In fact, I'd almost be saying, I guess in a way here, I'm also advocating for not having diversity, because that's a conversation I would probably include very few men in. And there we've removed the diversity as well.
My point was not that it is impossible for X group to make decisions about Y group that Y group would agree with.
I think we're not actually arguing with you now, Maddie.
And I think we're just semantics.
Yeah. Right now we're not arguing with you as much as the people who in the chat don't seem to grasp.
Oh, I'm not looking at the chat. I can't read and talk at the same time. I am not that gifted.
It's all good.
So
I can't either, which is why I get caught every time I look over.
It's I suppose why honestly I am a theist is because I get frustrated. I do keep up with the science on my community, and it doesn't seem to be moving at the speed that fits with the experience I've had, that fits with the experience of the people I know, that seems to fit with the community that I'm in. And it's very hard to reconcile science is always right with, right now, the science seems to be affirming, well, sometimes the science seems to be saying things like, some people are just lesser. Some people have less capability.
That is not an opinion
and
science has.
Deserve less rights.
That's not.
That's just a fact.
That is right.
No. That's just a fact. That is just a fact that some people are different. That people are different, and as long as people are different, some people are going to have greater and lesser abilities with respect to each other.
But I think she's talking about the way people are using it. I think she's talking about like the Stefan Molyneux's race realism bullcrap.
Okay, no. I was letting her get that. Letting her get there. It doesn't matter what it gets translated in by somebody who's not. So if the science says X and somebody translates it into something, whether it's eugenics or whatever else, that's an issue, but it's not a science issue. That's a human issue. Right. And when you said you're a theist because you're frustrated.
That's true.
If you're a theist because you're frustrated, A, is that a good reason to be a theist? And B, what type of theist are you that your theism is doing better in these areas than actual science?
Well, and sorry, I have a question to jump in here too, because you had said this thing about the speed upon which it's catching up to things. Meanwhile, as I observe known history and we look at thing after thing after thing, especially those that were evils justified by religion, and you see society change, you keep noticing society is changing in a certain direction, and that direction seems to be more secular humanism, not some theological based and certainly not a biblically based morality. And so all these corrections we see, people talk about
I'm
how
not a Christian. So
that's fine, but people talk about how like we're built on religious values, built on Christian values, and yet every time we see society make huge moral leaps forward, they're heading towards something, like I said, like secular humanism. They more resemble what is the secular humanist position, and that seems to be what people are catching up to. Now, within secular humanism, you certainly are going to have lots of things that are going to reference science that wouldn't even be necessary without it. So, for example, the idea that we should treat everybody equally and well, regardless of their race, even if science did support that, in fact, all people of race X are smarter and healthier and happier and whatever else than people of race Y, secular humanism would still tell you to treat them each well. Now, it just so happens that science has shown that race is basically a made-up concept, but if it wasn't the case, that wouldn't actually affect the morality in that scenario. So you're talking about the way people are using science as though science is an ideology, but my ideology as an atheist isn't science, it's secular humanism.
Right, exactly.
You're okay.
I'm curious, and I don't want to keep you. I don't want to keep you forever, Maddie, and don't want to make you answer things you don't want to answer. But you say you're a theist because you're frustrated, and I don't understand what kind of theism you're involved with that eases this frustration.
I am a polytheist. I draw spirituality from a lot of different places that I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting emotional.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't want to, my goal, believe it or not, even when I get riled up, is not to make anybody upset or make anybody participate in a discussion they don't want to. It was just my own curiosity. And if you are free to say, hey, I don't want to talk about that today or some other time, who knows?
Maddie, you still there? Do you want to maybe leave it
Yeah,
here and we
I'm
pick it up
still
again
here.
later? Go ahead.
Yeah, you get, thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
I think I'm happy to leave it here for now. Diversity is great. Secular humanism supports equal human rights regardless of what science would say about it. And yeah, I apologize for taking your time.
No.
Oh, you don't have to apologize. This is good conversation.
Yeah, we do the show so you will call and take our time. That's good stuff. Oh, it looks like they have the final note. But I guess just with that final thing she said, I want to clarify again. She said secular humanism supports human rights or civil rights regardless of what science would say.
Right.
Science shouldn't say anything about it. You can,
generally speaking,
right?
Yeah.
You can
not about the values. Science can inform us about the facts, so we can do
Absolutely right.
studies to show what people are like and to put different categories around things. Science can do all of that, but the value that says, "Hey, we're all human beings, and we're going to treat everybody as equal under the law and with respect," that.
Yeah,
You corrected the same thing that I was sitting here itching to correct, except I was like, oh, I think we want to beat that horse one too many times today.
I think the quick summary correction is good enough for everybody.
No, I like Maddie. I'm sorry that I asked her a question that was troubling, but I'd be happy to have a conversation with her whenever she wants to call in, including September 10th.
Exactly. September 10th.
See what I'm doing there? Like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. I'm learning how to be a YouTuber today.
And leave the comments on what we should call it, especially those of you who are so mad at Matt right now for understanding.
We should just call it Matt's Wrong.
That would be good. Yeah.
You can call into Matt's Wrong or tell Matt why he's wrong or something like that.
Yeah, I like that idea very much. But we'll let the people participate in the comments still because that's good for the algorithm. All right, we're going to go to California and we're going to talk to Sam. Sam, go ahead. I'm excited for this question. I think it's probably been asked on the show before, but I'm excited to have the conversation again. Go ahead. Give it to us.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Sam.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
That's all right. I usually am too.
So I guess I should start off with a question from the get-go, but I'm curious from an atheist perspective. What is wrong with believing in something that might not be true if it's not harming or if it's useful?
How do you know it's not harming?
I mean, if it does more good than bad, I would guess that would be my standard for guessing if something is.
Okay, so have you got like an example of something like that? Like today, because this came up twice for me already today over the course of two shows. What if somebody believes that a rabbit's foot's lucky? Is that harmful?
I have no problem with that. No.
Okay, so if they clutch their lucky rabbit's foot.
Harmful.
So if they believe that the rabbit's foot's lucky and they clutch their lucky rabbit's foot and they try to cross a busy highway, is that a problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. If they believe that this rabbit's foot's lucky, the line of reasoning that occurred in their head where it went from the claim that this rabbit's foot's lucky to them believing that it's lucky led them to believe something which we're both going to acknowledge is not true. And the harm of that is that thought process can lead them to other things too, like believing that their socks are lucky, or like believing that their shirt is lucky, or like believing Jesus can take the wheel. The process that somebody reaches a conclusion is important. If you had a calculator and it sometimes got the answer wrong, but it really wasn't all that important, but you knew you needed to do this one calculation in order to figure out how much money you were going to get from somebody. Would you like a calculator that's going to be right all the time or one that may or may not be right?
I mean, if it got it wrong, there wouldn't be a calculator to begin with.
Well, that's not true. Just be a calculator that's not always right. But we don't have too many of those because we would prefer the ones that are right.
Oh, true.
So the harm in believing something that isn't true is that your understanding of reality is not as accurate as it could be. It is flawed. If you believe left is right and right is left, you might be able to live your entire life without suffering any consequences. I mean, there's people, who are ambidextrous and it doesn't matter. There's people who constantly get their left and right swapped. But if you genuinely believe that left was right and right was left, even if you couldn't identify an immediate harm to that, your understanding of reality is still flawed. And I care about my understanding of reality. I want it to be as accurate as possible because I think that with an accurate understanding of reality, I'm more likely to make better decisions. And so if I go out into the world and I think left is right and right is left, and I think I have a lucky rabbit's foot, there's something wrong with my brain because my brain is accepting things that it shouldn't accept. And that means that my brain is likely to accept other things that it shouldn't accept. So even if you can't identify an immediate harm to it, I'd still like my brain to work correctly.
I see what you're saying.
It seems to me too.
I guess my question.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it seems to me too, usually when people call in to me with this, or they're asking me in a comment, or they're responding to a specific thing, they're very rarely talking about an issue as small as the rabbit's foot. Because even most people who believe they have a lucky rabbit's foot, when faced with a highway, they're not very likely to actually, in practicality, close their eyes and do it. Usually when they're calling in, they're trying to call in and tell me like, well, astrology doesn't hurt anybody. Psychics and mediums, that brings them comfort. Mormons do a bunch of service projects for other people. And so while I 100% agree with what Matt's saying, it's very rarely that a person is calling actually for just the level of the lucky rabbit's foot. But even if we just go down to that example, you're still talking about somebody has been convinced of this for some reason. There is some reason why this person believes in the lucky rabbit's foot. Now, if they're never going to cross the highway, whatever that mechanism of reasoning that taught them that it was still a lucky rabbit's foot, you're probably going to use that psychological mechanism again. And I'm very concerned for individuals when that happens, which is why you notice with this, for example, astrology, which a lot of people like to message me about, that it's not hurting anybody, even though I can give them examples of people who were raised in a home of fundamentalist astrologers who weren't allowed to follow the education paths and career paths that they wanted to follow because it didn't jive with their birth chart. But people will point to these things, and yet you also find out the demographics for selling things like rocks, which are energy crystals, at this incredible markup. And the gullibility essentially increases in these individuals because you now have a method of flawed reasoning which you can appeal to. And once people hone in on that, they go for it because unfortunately most people are, or at least a lot of people are dicks, and they will take advantage of other people. So you see a lot of crossover with the like incense for spiritual reasons, rocks for spiritual reasons with astrologers. And there's a reason why Utah is the #1 state for multi-level marketing and or pyramid schemes, if whichever way you like, because it's basically the same thing as the Mormon church. They run almost identically. So you've got this method of reasoning that is flawed, that primes you for other people that are going to be predatory in some way. Now, personally, with my values, if you try to convince me something is true that isn't true, the harm you're doing is breaking my value of wanting to believe things that are true. But when we're talking about applying to people at large, that flawed reasoning, which I think Matt was basically giving the exact same example, that the same problem, it's not necessarily about the problem with the lucky foot, though if you do walk out into traffic, that is a problem. It's what that reasoning you are now primed to use poorly will do.
Yeah, it's what con artists rely on. Con artists, that's the actual word there is confidence. And what they're relying on is your confidence in whatever they're pushing. And what they do is they make a pitch to you that is similar to something else that you may already accept. And so if you're the type of person who believes that, and I'm not talking to you specifically, but if you're the type of person that believes that Jesus rose from the dead because you trust what's written in the book and you find that believable, then you should also find other books believable, and you should find similar stories believable. And so you might just say, well, you know what? I'm just going to take what the Bible says, and I don't know if you do. I'm not picking on that. It's just what I know the most about. I can take what the Bible says, and it leads me to this conclusion. And at the end of the day, if I'm wrong, nobody gets hurt. There's no problem there, except that that's not true, because it impacts how you live your life, and it impacts whether or not you are at greater risk to believe other things that are problematic.
Yeah. Sam, I wonder, do you have an example of a belief that you know or that you're aware isn't true or you suspect isn't true that you don't think is harmful?
I mean, I was going to ask that in ties with Christianity, because, I mean, I've spent the best part of the last 2 years trying to prove that it's true, but I've realized that there is no empirical evidence to suggest either or, so it's just an ambiguous line of it could be true, it could not be true. But, like, for me personally, I don't see the harm in Christianity. Mostly what I see is the good that it does for society. So I'm at a point where...
You don't see the harm in it?
I'm okay. No. I mean, I don't see any harm in it.
Okay.
As far as an ideology. Now, I would say that some people do take God's name to do horrible things, but I don't take that as God. I take that as humans twisting what God intended to be good.
What about the Bible?
Intent.
What about the Bible? Is the Bible what God wants?
It is the Word of God.
Okay, so if the Bible's the Word of God and the Word of God is, if the Bible's the Word of God and the Bible is pro-slavery and the Bible is against homosexuals, then you're okay with all that?
I don't believe the Bible is pro-slavery as far as homosexuality. The way I understand it, it's not. I leave that up to God, and it's none of my business what people do. So I tend to see people would.
But it is.
I would.
No. The Bible says that if a man lies with another man as he lies with a woman, they are an abomination and are deserving of death. Do you think that they're deserving of death?
No.
And okay, so you're in disagreement with the Bible. And also, when you say the Bible, you don't think the Bible is pro-slavery. Have you read Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25, where it specifically tells you who you can enslave, how to enslave them, how to trick them to be your slaves forever, how you can beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days, how they're your property that you can pass on to your children?
Honestly, I haven't read that. I haven't read the Old Testament simply because it has too much of thou and thee for me, and I find it a little tedious. But
well, I think that if you're going to advocate, for a God being good and not seeing a problem with a religion, you might ought to know more about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I know God personally, so.
Do you? Like, when you say you know God personally, how does that work? Like, does God talk to you?
How does it work?
Does God talk to you?
Personally, like audible voice, no, but it's
okay.
More...
How can you say you know someone personally if they don't talk to you?
He does talk to you. He's just not in like how I'm talking to you. It's more
okay, but this is personal. In what way could you have a conversation with God that you think it's personal?
Through prayer, through reading the Bible, through fellowship with other Christians.
Not all the Bible,
I've
though,
prayed,
apparently.
I've read the Bible, I've had fellowship. What does God tell you?
I mean, you have to be more specific. That's too broad of a
Okay,
question.
did God bother to tell you that,
coherent-
did God tell you whether or not he's okay with slavery?
I know God loves all humans, so I would not say he's okay with
That's
slavery.
not what the Bible says.
I will have to read up on that and get back to you, but I do know, like, people can justify anything.
I think it
By
is so
using the
funny that
Bible.
you just said that, because it
Yeah.
sounds to me like that's exactly what you're doing. When you're saying, I don't see a problem with Christianity, but then you describe to us the document by which Christianity is derived, that you basically aren't aware of a lot of horrible things in it. By
What?
the way, go ahead.
What you're doing is saying, I don't see a problem with Pandora's box, but I've never opened it or looked to find out what might be inside.
You also seem to have a mixed up concept that maybe you actually do believe you know, but you seem to not understand the distinction between knowing something and believing something. Now, in the way I use it, I only use the word know to mean I believe as confidently as I could, because I don't even necessarily know anything. But you're seeming to describe that you have a knowledge of God, not just a belief in God. And so I think Matt was trying to find out what your demonstrations of God were, and how you were communicating and how you could know when...
I've never met anybody who said they've got a personal relationship with someone and that person doesn't speak with them directly. Now, it could be somebody who's mute, but, sign language, writing something down, eye contact, whatever. I don't believe that you have a personal relationship with a God. I don't believe anybody on the planet has a personal relationship with a God. Because curiously, for the entire history of humanity, we've been asking people, please demonstrate that this God that you say you have a personal relationship with exists, and they always fail. Their God is like, I've got a girlfriend, but you don't know her because she goes to another school. And I don't believe them.
I mean, using that example, your girlfriend would be another human, therefore she would have to exist in the physical world.
There may be a cultural barrier here, because he's making reference to a common American joke, and I think maybe you might be American, but the joke is when you don't have a girlfriend, you pretend you do, and she goes to another school. She lives in Canada, or whatever else.
Yeah. She lives far away. Okay. You don't know her, and that's what people tell me about their God. He interacts differently from other people. I don't know how, there's not a single relationship in my life that I would describe as a personal relationship where I cannot have, there's no one who I have a personal relationship with who I couldn't ask a question and get an answer back directly. Can you ask God a question and get an answer back directly?
Yes, of course.
Does God know what number I'm thinking of?
I would assume so.
Then you can ask God what number I'm thinking of, and God should tell you, right?
I know what you're getting at, and...
Good, because I already got there.
Technically, I know what the answer should be, but that's not exactly how prayer works in the first place.
Yes, I'm aware. I know exactly how prayer works. It doesn't.
Yeah, there's the thing with prayer, and why so many religions appeal to it, is because it works universally for all of them, despite the contradictory nature of the answers you're getting. So you're making these appeals to how great prayer is for this specific function, and yet anybody can use prayer and get that their version of God, that their version of their religion is true. And I know I'm stealing a line of questions that Matt uses, but I'll do it, but with a bigger beard. If you can use the same mechanism to get to different conclusions, what good is that mechanism, and how can you claim to know anything by using it?
I mean, personally, I don't think there is really different religion. It's all just one God with different names. I mean, being from another country, I kind of got this concept easier because my native tongue, when we call out to God, we call it different than the way conventional Americans would call God, but it's still the same Christian God. So just like Allah, and there's so many gods, I can't name them all. They're all just God. We just all call them different things based on where we're born.
So back to the
Did God tell you that was okay? Did God tell you it was okay to just call him whatever name? What is the most specific message you've ever gotten from God?
What field of study I should go to?
So God can tell you what field of study you can go to, but not what number I'm thinking of.
I mean, that was a personal question that I was asking him about. But for me to ask,
you can't imagine the personal level. The personal level to which, if you tell Matt the number he's thinking of right now, how compelling an argument toward him finding this supposed God would be.
If you could ask God, and God tells you what number I'm thinking of right now, you destroy, or God destroys, my career, the atheist experience, the upcoming show that I may be starting on September 10th here on the line, all of this stuff. It all goes away. And yet you think God won't do that, but he'll tell you what field of study to go into. By the way, why does God care what field of study you go into? Don't you have free will? Isn't it your life? Shouldn't you be going into the field of study that you want?
Yes, but I also want to know what God's plan for me is, so I asked.
Why? If your parents told you you're going to be a garbage collector, or the state defined at birth, hey, Matt's going to be a garbage collector, you're going to be a neurosurgeon, you wouldn't accept that. So why is it a good thing when you think that God has a plan for you?
I mean, if my parents told me to go into a certain field of study, I would take it into consideration. But the state does not know me, and like God is the one that created me specifically for a specific life and a specific path. So of course,
you're just a useless puppet. God created you for a purpose, and you're going to do whatever God wants you to do. You're just a puppet. It doesn't matter what you want, right?
I mean, what I want and what God wants should align if I'm living my life right, and that's fine.
No. That's like saying, he only beats me because he loves me.
Also, if you're going to say the Bible is your source of truth, the Bible is filled with advices to do things defiant of your nature, defiant of what would make you happy, defiant of Jesus has people leave their wives and children to follow him for friggin'. Why was I not swearing? I was going to say for fuck's sake, and then I thought I couldn't swear on this program. I'm not on the Atheist Experience.
Somehow or another, I can say whatever the fuck I want on Atheist Experience. That's not a problem. Somehow or another, God's not good with people eating shrimp or having sex with people of the same gender. He's not good with equality. He's not good with slavery. I mean, he's fine with slavery. He's just not on the good side of this issue of slavery.
Confusing the Old Testament with the New Testament.
You don't.
I think
that.
Okay, Sam. I'm for your benefit. I'm going to ask you to stop and go think and call us back another time, because when you say that I'm confusing the Old Testament with the New Testament, you're confusing me with somebody who doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about, because there is no New Testament without an Old Testament. There is no atonement or salvation without original sin, without the 10 Commandments. There is no prophecy without the Old Testament. You are a cafeteria Christian who has picked and choose what you want to believe and ignored the rest, whereas I was a sincere, committed, Bible-believing Christian who understood that you take it all or you leave it all. You don't get to pick, because God is either in all of it or not. You don't get to just throw out the Old Testament, because that's thou shalt not kill. That is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That is everything about prophecy. It's everything about original sin. It's everything that leads to the entire reason that Jesus has to come down here. It is an embarrassing travesty of a myopic, narcissistic, evil, petulant thug who can't ever get anything to go right. He makes people, it goes wrong. He tries to fix it, it goes wrong. He kills everybody except for one family, and it goes wrong. It just keeps going wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. So don't do you're confusing the Old Testament with the New Testament when you're the one that's not read the Old Testament.
I apologize, but what I was saying when I said you confuse the Old Testament with the New Testament is about the comment with the shrimp, because we are able to eat whatever we would like because Jesus died so that we are no longer under the law, but we are
So did that, when Jesus died, so why was it wrong to eat shrimp before?
Because from my understanding and what I've read from books, that was more for the Israelites' health because they did not have the sanitary capabilities that we have at the moment.
Oh, but they did 2,000 years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Sam,
so you think things were vastly superior sanitary-wise while Jesus was around in first century?
Sam, you actually you hit the nail on the head though, because you said the phrase "from my understanding," and that's been the issue this whole time. Your understanding is extremely subjective and it's extremely cherry-picked. You think that there's nothing wrong with Christianity and it does no harm. I don't think most Christians believe that. I think they can point to many times where Christianity and people, now they're going to use the reasoning of misinterpretation, even when you're just taking the words at face value. But they're going to acknowledge that it's played a horrific part in history. And the fact of the matter is, your subjective approach, you wouldn't be able to win an argument with another Christian who's read more of the Bible than you, let alone somebody with a totally opposing worldview. And so you're coming to here and you're telling us that through prayer, you have these personal experiences. It's all the same God. Meanwhile, I've met people who have both said their God told me I'm going to burn in hell, and that was through prayer they found that out. And then others who said their God confirmed to them through prayer that they just care that I'm a good person. So apparently it's the same God, but he's telling different people different things. At this point, I'm open to the idea that God is Loki and he's just fucking with all of us. Not really. I'm not actually open to that idea, but it's a funny concept. The person right now who is confused and confusing concepts with other concepts in this about Christianity is the Christian, not the atheist. So I would highly suggest you go do some research into the harm that Christianity has done and can do, because by the current standard that you are saying it does no harm, I could say about anything that has done tremendous harm, like Matt's earlier example of Mein Kampf. I could take Mein Kampf and put it through the cherry picking and the sort of thing that you're doing. We actually see this in action today with terrorist organizations like Boko Haram that at the local level basically preach that they are a community and they are supporting these communities of people and saying they're a humanitarian group for the people they care about, and yet they are also massively murdering people. So I think you need to figure out what the barrier for something causing harm is and really do some introspection after doing some extrospection, I guess would be the word, of the Bible by actually reading it.
Hey, we've run like way over time, and I'd love to talk to you more, Sam. But I think we got to wrap this up, and I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, call back again, Sam, once you've done all that. All right,
or before. I mean, you don't have to go read the whole thing before you talk to us ever again. Sure. There is one thing I want to clarify with chat, because there may be some people who are not familiar with how and why I do some things. Because somebody was like, "Oh, I think you're wrong, Matt," because essentially you're suggesting that every Christian must be a fundamentalist Christian. No. So Christianity is such a muddled mire of disgusting confusion that I can and will adopt a version of Christianity that is the exact opposite of or in conflict with the person that I'm talking to. I'm not saying, I have no way to say who is or isn't a true Christian. I'm not in any way saying that only fundamentalists are true Christians or that only fundamentalist Christians are real. I was using that as an example because that directly contradicts what Sam's position and understanding is. And to let Sam know that they are on the weaker footing. I'll tell you who's on the strongest footing, fundamentalists. I don't care if it pisses off the gay pride flag, liberal, gay friendly church in California. The fundamentalists are the ones that at least can point to the passage in the Bible and say, here's what it says, we're following that. Everybody else is using their own personal interpretation of it. And while they may be better people and they may be better off, they're not on better footing.
Right.
And if I had a fundamentalist on there, I can't do the same thing with a fundamentalist that I do with Sam, because the fundamentalist is going to come back and say, hey, this is what it says in the Bible. There's a method to the madness. I don't think anybody's a true Christian. If your definition of true Christian is somebody who actually has a relationship with the risen Christ, I don't think anybody does, because I don't think there's a risen Christ to have a relationship with. And this is somebody who for years believed that he did have that relationship. I don't get to decide what's a true Christian. But you know what I get to do? I get to put on whatever hat I have to show that Christians can't decide who's a true Christian, and that God is absent, the absentee landlord from Devil's Advocate line there with Pacino. And that is damning at every possible opportunity for Christianity. The fact that there are so many shows, there's so many of us who know what's going on, and we can just say, hey, I don't believe this anymore. Do you have a good reason? Well, I haven't actually read the book, or I kind of look at this, or I don't really see the harm in it, or all this, or I have a personal relationship with God, but he's never told me anything useful in my entire life. That is the damning thing about Christianity. And it's the reason why starting September 10th, I'll be doing this more often.
Was the number 48?
No.
Wouldn't
it
that
was
have
long.
blown your mind though if it had been?
There were people guessing 69 and other numbers. The number was long.
I think they were trying to guess yours, but they were intercepting my thoughts. Jimmy's a pervert, but everybody already knew that. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you come back here on September 10th. Also come back in the Sundays between now and then. September 10th, Matt's new show will begin. You have a chance to give suggestions that we might pick from down in the comments on what the show should be called. Thank you, Matt, for joining today. And,
absolutely.
And as we all know, I don't have a graceful way of ending the show. So